But I want to get Dr. Williams' knowledge here because, like I said, he runs a practice, Williams Chiropractic. And when you think of a chiropractor's office, you think of more just kind of, I'm going to go and get my back cracked and then have to come back the next week. But one of the reasons I was always resistant to going to a chiropractor because that's kind of what I thought of the chiropractic business as a whole. But Dr. Williams is a family friend, and I started talking with him and realized he had a different approach. So I just wanted to kind of give you the opportunity to discuss that approach and kind of how you got to where you're at with your practice now, because it's been a couple different iterations here.
Sure. Yeah. It actually, I started as kind of the type of chiropractor that you were talking about. I didn't really know any different, and so I would see people, and I sort of had the idea that you adjust them when you see them, and then as often as you need to keep things feeling good, that's how often you see people, and you adjust them every time you see them. And if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. And then it was a little while into practice, and I started to kind of feel a little bit uncomfortable with that idea. Because it actually really started, I had two people that came in at about the same time, and they both had low back pain, and one of them with adjustments within a couple of visits was basically back to 100%, and the other one I hadn't made any difference with. And it started to bother me because I thought, well, how is that possible? How is it that two people with the same problem get the relatively same treatment and have totally different outcomes? And so that got me thinking that there had to be more to the story. And so I started looking, and I started studying, and I started researching. And the first thing I did was I went back to school and I became a digestive and internal health specialist. And that was to learn nutrition, to learn the gut, to learn how the body processes food, how it eliminates waste, what it does with everything that you're putting into it. And that filled in a lot of gaps, and then it left a little bit, which I went back to school again and started studying the brain. And so that was neurology, neuroanatomy, biochemistry, psychology, and it was just a way to understand how the brain and our thoughts affect our function. And with all of that, it started to modify my practice, because what I realized is that there were ways that the body got itself goofed up, and it comes down to, I guess what we have more of in this room than anything is men. Men are the problem. So, guys, your wives were right, and sorry to break the news, but
Mom agrees with that too in the corner. She's off mic, but she agrees with that.
No, that's a little joke we have in my practice, because what I figured out was that there are three ways that trouble happens in the body. There are mechanical things, there are emotional things, and then there are nutritional things. Those are three ways that the body gets itself into trouble. And so my practice that I have now sort of developed out of that idea is that if I know there are three ways that the body gets itself into trouble, I need to have ways to address it in all of those areas. So the first area, the mechanical stuff, chiropractic school did a great job of preparing me for that. And that's the stuff where things get knocked out of place. Mechanical things tend to have an event. It's an accident, it's an injury, it's the sort of thing where you can say, I know where I was, I know what I was doing, I know how I felt before it, and I know how I felt after it. And those are the kinds of things where an adjustment, that's, that first patient I was talking about with the back pain had a mechanical style injury, and so there were forces that moved things out of position, and I was able to apply forces that sort of countered that to put it back into the right position. And after a few times, we're back in business, back where things should be. But the other patient, the mechanical style approach didn't address the problem. And so what I would do now is I would start looking, well, okay, we know it's not a mechanical thing. What is it? And that's when we start looking at nutrition, and we look at the diet, and we look at how well we're digesting food, how well things are being absorbed into the body, and then how well the waste is able to be eliminated. Because if the body can't do that well, it can't perform and it can't heal. And then the last thing would be our thoughts, the emotional side of things. That's the last thing that we look at sometimes, and that's a little bit trickier. But it's the reason why how our thoughts affect the function. So it's the way that for some people, if they get angry, their blood pressure goes up, or other people that worry a lot get stomach aches, and so it gave me the tools necessary, one, to identify the problem, and then also a way to start correcting it, and in a way that allowed the body to heal and go back to normal.
I got interested in this approach because I think we can all relate to the fact that kind of the layman version of this, of what you're talking about, which is, all of us, when we have stress, everybody has stress, different things. You try to reduce it however you can, but there's two different ways to handle stress. You want to try to be proactive, but this was always something that I had as a criticism when I feel like a lot of doctors will be, well, you got to handle your stress. Well, I remember them telling my mom that when she went through 4 surgeries for her breast cancer. That's kind of hard. She's kind of stressed out because she's got breast cancer and she's dealing with 4 surgeries. It's kind of tough. So it's like, well, handle your stress. Okay, I got it. But obviously it's going to then manifest, even if it seems on the surface that you're handling it well, there's something that's going on either internally, or maybe it manifests externally as well, or kind of goes internal to external. We all have that. There's different things. I can think of a bunch of different examples from friends and family of ways that it has manifested. But to your point, like the stomach aches, and people will get shingles, people will get all sorts of different things from the stress, and getting to the root cause is important, because you can't just say, well, I have a stressful life. Okay, well, deal with it. Yep. That's not really a good, I'm no doctor, but I don't think that's really great advice. You got to give them some weapons to deal with it.
Well, the rule in my practice is that men are the cause of all the stress, and stress is what causes all disease. So if I had to say what is the one thing that I treat, it is stress. The question is, in what form does that stress take in the body? And that's where we look at the 3 ways, the mechanical, the emotional, and the nutritional, to understand how the body's getting itself into trouble. And that's where we, when you look at any injury, any disruption, any dysfunction in the body, it's going to follow one of those pathways. And so it's easy to kind of go through the checklist and say, all right, well, did I hurt myself physically? Was it in an accident? Was there some sort of a traumatic injury that affected my body? And if the answer is no, then you move on to one of the other ones. Did I eat anything differently? Did I change my diet? Did I decide that Wonder Bread for a snack every day was the right answer to solve my problems? or is there anything that I could point to in the way that I'm feeding my body that could be the problem? And if that's not there, then you look at, well, what's the last thing? Well, how are my thoughts? Do I have generally healthy thoughts? Or are they generally unhealthy? Are they normally of a positive nature, or are they normally of a negative nature? The body's going to follow whatever the prevailing thoughts are. So if you discover that that's where it is, there's a way that you can start to alter your thoughts to switch them in order to enable healing in the body.
I recently found out that the listeners, it may be flipped for the nighttime sports shows, but the listeners for Jethro are 60% women and 40% men. So this segment has been very popular, that we're talking about the men are the cause of all the evil here. Dr. Williams' practice is very popular with women. But I want to hit on some of these points. We're going to take a quick break, but I want to come back and hit on some of these points that he's talking about, and talk about how this kind of can be extrapolated out to sports injuries, because we talk about injuries a lot on this show. We have other medical doctors that cover things for us, and I think there's an interesting tie there between what Dr. Williams is doing and some of the research and things that we've covered on the show, and how that could lead to injuries, and it's not really maybe as simple as we're trying to make it here. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here in studio with Dr. Michael Williams. We're talking about the body and mental and physical health here, and I want to I think there's an interesting tie to sports, because followers of the show know that probably one of our most common guests is Dr. Jimmy Liao, who comes on and analyzes football injuries for us. But one of the reasons I'm interested in the injuries is because I think injuries explain more than we give them credit for, one on the field and off. We just go, oh, well, this player didn't make the catch, or he couldn't run as fast, or he couldn't stay up in coverage. Well, sometimes injuries are the cause of that. I don't think fans like that as an explanation, but I think it's a very fair one. If you have some tightness or some issues or an injury, and the fact that you can't, and you normally have 4.4 speed, but you slow down to 4.5, and you're guarding a guy that's 4.3, it's going to be tough to keep up with him if he's totally healthy. So that is a factor. But one of the reasons I've gotten into this myself is because I've tried to look for this root cause that Dr. Williams tries to address, because one of the things that I've gone through in my journey is I've had an Achilles injury and a calf injury on the same leg, and I started wearing flat shoes because I looked into the shoes that were zero drop, basically kind of identifying the fact that, okay, over evolution, we have been the same. We've been flat-footed, but now we're putting the heel up a little bit, and that's anti to what it's been for thousands of years. We always walked flat-footed when we didn't have any shoes, and then the shoes were flat. And in the 70s, when Dr. J and those guys were wearing the Converse high tops that were flat, they didn't have as many injuries. So I brought this up with Dr. Williams, and he said, well, yeah, that could play part of it, but also, I want you to kind of explain what you told me about how there's other things that have happened since that time frame, specifically with how we've changed our diets and then the type of foods and how we process foods here in the States.
Right. So maybe before that, let's just touch back on the idea of stress. The way I define it is that stress is an energy deficiency. So whenever the body is asked to do something and it doesn't have enough energy to do it, stress is the result. And so what we're always looking for is where is the body being asked to supply energy, and why can't it supply enough? So then we take that a little further and we say, well, what are the reactions? What are some of the things that happen if the body doesn't have enough energy? Well, the first thing it does when the body is under stress, and it doesn't matter if it's mechanical, emotional, or nutritional, any of those three, the body is under stress, it tightens. If it is under stress for the entire body, the whole body is going to tighten. If it is under a specific form of stress, then specific areas are going to get tight. So, for example, if your kidneys are having a hard time, now this is not disease, this is a struggle. If the kidneys are struggling, then the lower back is going to get tight. A lot of times when I see patients with low back pain, they have a kidney issue that is kind of starting to show up a little bit. So one of the things that I was talking about with this idea of tightness is that if you have a disruption in the gut, specifically in the bowel, it will create tightness in the bottom of the foot. So if you have an unbalanced digestive system, then the bottoms of your feet can potentially be tight. If that tightness is in the bottom of the foot and you try to perform athletically, the chances of there being tension on the Achilles tendon go up, and then we start to see the potential for injury go up as a result. The other thing I was thinking about since we talked about that is that another place, the calf, is a place that can get tight if there is a hormonal disruption. And so I think a lot of things that people are doing now, especially when you look at the different supplements people are taking, they have the potential, and men and women have the potential to disrupt their hormonal system. That creates some tension in the calf, and that also could be tugging on the Achilles tendon. So we could see a potential for injuries start to go up from that as well.
I think that's an interesting point to make, because it makes me think of one of the discussions I had with Dr. Liao, who we talked about football injuries with, is we were talking about, it was when the Lions had the rash of injuries last year, and I think people want to go to try to explain something. They want to go to kind of the simplest. Okay, well, let's see, what's the turf? What are they run? First it's contact, and then if you don't have the contact, okay, well, what do we do with non-contact injuries? We know how to diagnose. Okay, well, a guy got his arm pinned between himself and somebody else. Alex Anzalone had the Lions linebacker last year, and he broke his arm.
Sure.
That doesn't take a doctor.
That would be a mechanical source of injury for sure. Same thing with Aiden Hutchinson and his leg. That was a mechanical trauma to the body that would fall into the mechanical sources of injury.
That leg whip has been responsible for a couple things. He hit McNeil with that the year before too. So yeah, those things are more obvious. Then they wanted to go into, okay, because I even broke this down on one of the shows, like artificial turf versus grass, and obviously the footwear is usually pretty uniform, but the part that we're taking out of this is the part that you're talking about, which is we can't speak to how these people are handling their nutrition. I remember Terrell Owens famously, who was always in great shape. He could run a 4.440, 6'5", great receiver, six-pack abs. He ate McDonald's every day, and I'm sure when he was younger that probably was okay because the system was able to keep up with it. But then he picked up more injuries as his career went on, even though his physical prowess was still there, but he clearly wasn't getting the proper nutrition with that.
Sure. Yeah. And that's not only is it critical to make sure you're eating the right things, but to be able to identify, am I digesting it, absorbing it, using it correctly, and able to get rid of it when I'm done with it? Because in any of those circumstances, if your body can't do it well, then we're back to that idea of stress, because there's more being asked of the body than what it can handle. And then there's going to be a tightness that develops. And so when we can identify where that tightness is, we can start to trace that backward and narrow down the place in the body that is disrupted and out of balance. Because if the body is out of balance and you're trying to compete, then one of two things has to happen. You either lose performance or you get injured. And we see it over and over and over again. So that's where you say, I used to be able to run a 4.4 or a 4.440. Is that right?
Right. Yep.
and now I can't. And well, why is that? And so we look at, well, where did the performance go? Why are we not able to match what we were before?
I was more at like a 6.4. My 40 was never a 4.4. It didn't matter how good my nutrition was, so that wouldn't have worked for me. But no, this stuff we've talked about this with another guest on the show, Zach Zenner, because he has a nutrition and workout outfit, and he talks about how like he was kind of a practice squad guy that made the team, was like the back end of the roster, made it onto the roster. That guy, those margins are so important, like finding that, because he might not have that natural physical prowess, the natural athleticism that some of the other guys have that he's competing against. So he's got to find where those micro advantages are. So he's a sports agent now, but this is one of the things that he's really plugged into with his kids that he now advises as an agent. He says, hey, I'll help you work out your deals and all that, but we got to get you a better deal. If we can get you slightly better numbers at the combine, slightly better performance by just tweaking your diet, that's going to make a big difference. And to a 22-year-old that might be swinging through the Taco Bell line at 1 o'clock in the morning, that could actually make a huge difference, because you can get away with more of that stuff when you're younger, but as you get older, as your career draws on, as you get more pressure on yourself, more stress, then it's harder to maintain that same type of performance, like you're saying.
Right, yeah. And one of the things that I find is missed a lot in nutrition is the idea of digestion. And so we tend to assume that if you put the right things into the body knows what to do with it and is capable of doing that. And I find a lot of times that that's not the case. It's going to be better that if you are putting the right things in, but poorly digested food is going to be poorly digested food no matter where it's coming from. And poorly digested food creates a lot of struggle for the body because it can't extract the right amount of energy from it, and it leaves excess amounts of waste that the body has to deal with. And over time, those two things start to combine to be low energy and not feeling good, because you've got too much waste and not enough energy to be able to deal with it.
And then I'm sure that's a compounding factor, because then that's one thing I've always focused on. It's like if you eat worse, then you feel bad, and then you're going to eat worse because it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to satiate this craving, or I don't feel good enough to make myself a salad, or what have you. So we're going to take another break, but I'm going to have Dr. Williams. I'm sure there's some interest in his services with all the talking we're doing about these different things, because this is kind of how I found him. I said, hey, like, I'm doing all right. I'm doing better than I have been. I have a shoulder issue where it's a permanently separated shoulder that didn't really get fixed. Can you help me with this? And the nice thing about his services is they apply to a lot of people. It's not just, okay, I have a problem with my back, or if I feel tightness with my back. It's really applicable in a lot of situations. So I want him to take us through the different processes and how his practice works. So we'll take a quick break and come back and talk about that. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Being joined here by Dr. Michael Williams of Williams Chiropractic. He's taking us through a lot of root causes of things, because I think that's kind of, if I didn't start this journey with him until after I started the show, but if I would have, I think I would have thought of the parallels to the show, because we don't often like to just look at the result. Okay, well, he dropped the ball on 3rd and 7, and so he stinks. That to me is pretty lazy radio. It happens a lot. We won't name any names, but it does happen. It's a popular sports radio trope. But really, all these things come down to a lot of different factors, and so it's always good to get to your peak performance, whether you're just a fan or somebody trying to live their everyday life, or you're an athlete. Dr. Williams treats both. So just want to have you kind of outline the process for people that are interested, and then we'll be able to direct them to the resources available at the end of the interview here.
Yeah, great. So what I start with is sort of an interview consultation process. And so the idea there is that we want to know what are the things that are happening, and then that's where I can start to identify a little bit. What are we into here? Is this a mechanical issue? Is it a nutritional issue? Is it more on the thought side and the emotional side of things? So we start with that, and then what I do, I run a very specialized test. It's called an integrated urinalysis panel. It's a 24-hour test where what we're looking at is the way the body is balancing itself. So I call it a full body audit, because we really get a ton of valuable information from that, and in ways that I don't know of another way to get it. So we're looking at, what does the body have too much of that is trying to dump and get rid of, and what does it not have enough of that is trying to hang on to? Because those become critical things when we're talking about how the body heals. Because if it doesn't have enough of the raw materials to heal with, it's not going to be able to. And if it can't get things out well enough, then it's not going to heal either. So when we want to get the body back to performance, we've got to look at that. And so we start with that urinalysis panel, and that's where I can start to see all of the ins and outs of digestion and elimination. We can look at that process from what you eat to what the body does with it and how it ends up at the end. And from that, we can say, all right, you're not digesting food well, and not just you're not digesting food, but we can break it down even more than that and specifically look at how well we're digesting protein, how well we're digesting carbohydrates, how well we're digesting fats, and what the consequences of poor digestion of any of those three could be inside of the body. And then we see the elimination side to be able to see, well, okay, if we're able to break it down, what are we able to do with it after that? And so from that, then we get a really good window at the way the body is struggling and where to start. And then we can move from there into the treatment phase, where we're identifying the effects of some of those things in the body. We know then where the problems might have originated, but what did it really do, and how do we turn that around so the body can start to heal itself and get back to normal?
This was an interesting part of the process for me because I've gotten better about my intake over the last few years here, but you always need tweaks. And as a former weightlifter, former power lifter, that this made sense to me because it was more kind of like on the macro side of things where you're taking, okay, well, this is a protein, this is a carb, this is a fat. And it's kind of like that. But unless you're tracking it to that degree, and really arguably, even if you are tracking it to that degree, there's two phases of this. You're tracking the intake, but you're using labels and you're using whatever's posted, and you might not have the competency to take in what you need to understand that because you're not a professional. Other than you, we're not really professional nutritionists or have degrees in this, and so you're trying to take that in, but really that's all somewhat irrelevant because it's like you can take in whatever you want, but it matters what the body does with it.
Right. If you don't put your paycheck into the bank, your bank account's never going to show any difference. And so if you can't cash those checks, then you're going to stay poor. And that's what the body does if you're not able to digest that food. I remember the first time I ran one of those urine panels on myself. I was working with one of my mentors at the time, and he looked at the results and he said to me, "You're protein deficient." And I said, "Your test is broken." I said, "Nobody eats more meat than I do," and he said, You are looking at this from a consumption standpoint, not from a digestion standpoint. It's not how much you consume; it's how much you're able to digest. So, another one of my mentors used to say that saying that you are what you eat. He said that's wrong. He said you are what you're able to digest, and so I always kind of remember that because when we're looking at some of these problems, that's really where it starts, and that's where I see a lot of people who have changed their diet and done a lot of the right things, but they've missed that digestive component. And so for them, it's just a matter of making sure that they're digesting the good things that they're eating, and then everything starts to turn around for them.
I had a good example of this when we went through this because I have been eating better, but one of the things I was leaning heavily on were egg whites because I thought, okay, I'll reduce the cholesterol and I eat a lot of eggs, but I'll go with the egg whites. I'm getting a lot of protein here. But basically what you told me when we went through the test or even before we even got to the test is, hey, that's not really that it may say something on the label, but that's not really how it's going down.
Eggs are best eaten as the whole package, the whites and the yolks all together, because our bodies need everything that's in there. The yolks have a lot of things that, when combined with the whites, really give us the benefit. If we're just consuming the whites, sometimes we don't get all of the good nutritional benefits out of an egg that we might otherwise.
So we're coming up to the holidays. I feel like this is a good time to talk about this a little bit because we got Thanksgiving coming up. We got Christmas coming up. People are probably thinking a little doom and gloom here. They're saying, okay, these two are trying to lecture me about my nutrition and my food. So what advice do you have for people going into the holidays here? Hopefully you get some people consulting you, but I like that it's a little bit more, it plans for everyday life, your approach. It's not, you can't never have, a dessert or whatever, but there's flexibility here.
Yeah. Well, just remember that idea that life is about balance, and none of us are asked to be perfect all the time, thankfully, but we also can't push the limits and not expect the body to react. If we push it too far in any one direction, it's going to react negatively. So what we have to do is find the balance. So I usually break things down, especially when we're talking about food, in pretty simple terms, and I have some categories that I break it down into. There are builders, there are eliminators, there are congestors, and there are lubricators. So in order to find the balance, what we want to do is kind of look at the body and say, well, is it running too fast or running too slow? Am I stuck in some way, or does it seem like things are running out too fast? And if for a lot of people, they eat too many of the congestors. Those are going to be the grains, the breads, the sugars, the sweets, all of the stuff that we really like, the things that are everywhere at this time of year. And it ends up kind of plugging the body up because they're congestors and they're going to do exactly what their name suggests. So in that case, to balance that out, you probably want to eat more on the eliminators. Eliminators are going to be the fresh fruits and vegetables that are going to help open up the pathways of elimination so that the body starts to be able to clean itself a little better. So if you find that you are over consuming some of those congesters, look to the eliminators in order to balance it. And then the builders, those are the protein sources. My general rule is that if it runs, swims, or flies, that's a protein. And then you can mix in some other things that beans and things like that have some protein in them as well. But find the protein, because the body's not going to do well if it's not being built up in some way. So give it a little bit of the builders every day. Find the eliminators. Be careful with the congesters, and then the last one's the lubricators. That's the oils, greases, and fats that help keep everything running smoothly. So just use those as you need to, and find the balance through the holidays, and then don't try to make that make it the exception rather than the rule.
Don't take your pumpkin pie and throw it. That's not what he means by flies. That doesn't work. He's talking about birds, chickens, things, the turkeys, things like that.
It's all in the application of the rules, right?
Well, we're going to balance this too, because one of the things I'm kicking around, because we are going to do a Thanksgiving show, and one of the things I'm kicking around is doing some sort of Thanksgiving draft where we take all the people involved in that individual show, and we basically draft, like, okay, we're going to make our Thanksgiving meal here with a main, a couple of sides, a dessert. So we'll balance out, kind of the healthy coverage, and then we'll indulge in that one meal, and then we'll get back on track there. But for people that are trying to get back on track, whether it is in the holidays to try to kind of beat that, because this always happens. We're cyclical as people. We get into the holiday cycle, and then we hit the new year and we say, okay, now we're going to do it. But maybe now is the time. Maybe it's time to get ahead of it, or maybe you do it then. But tell people where to find you and how to initiate the process if they're interested in your services here.
The easiest way is to go to the website, williamschiropracticgr.com. From there, you can see a little breakdown of everything that we talked about, the way I do things, the way I practice, describes the adjusting techniques that I use, how I enable the brain to be able to coordinate function with the body. And then there's also a really easy scheduling app that you can link to on the website, so you can figure out what works best for your schedule. If phone is more your style, you'd rather call 616-344-4727. Rings up to the front desk, and they'll be able to help you get things set up there too.
I'd really recommend the services. It's helped me out a lot, because it's just nice to have some additional help. We're all trying our best here with our help, but sometimes you just need some direction from somebody that can actually see the hard data. I'm kind of a data-driven person. I'm a finance person. We look at the data with all these sports and things. So it's nice to have data on yourself to then drive decision-making, rather than kind of flying blind and saying, oh, well, yeah, okay, well, I think this is right. It's nice to have that data. So be sure to check out Dr. Williams. He's done great for me, and we'll continue to update things too as we go. May have him on in the new year to kind of talk about New Year's things and New Year's resolutions and all that. But appreciate you joining the show and educating us on nutrition and health. And hopefully we are able to send some people your way, because you can help a lot of people with this information here.